I'm really excited to be here with you tonight. It's a passion for me to talk about real estate and to help people. It's my mission in life, is to help people to accomplish and live a life that they want to. And I don't say it lightly, and I don't mean it in jest. I mean it for real. If you have a big goal, I really want you to accomplish it. And I want you to not BS yourself as to what it takes to accomplish it, because all of the big goals require all of the big effort. And a lot of times we miss the difference between the big goal and the big effort and the amount of time and perseverance and pain and frustration and all of the learning that goes into it. And so I wanted to share just a few things about myself, and then really talk about, Dan mentioned, some actual deals that we've done that can give you a roadmap of how they can get done. And what's cool is there's numerous people in this room actually who have been a party to some of these deals as well. And so it's not just me talking about it, it's literally people in this room who've been a part of those deals. So I'm Nathan Brooks. This is my fam, my wife on the left, my daughter Grace on the top right, and my son who is on his way to become the next Mr. Beast on the bottom. That's his new YouTube setup. If you're a Fortnite player, you can check him out. Dab Crafty is my dude. We set goals every year as a family. I set personal, business, and family goals. And I like to put these out here and challenge you all to think about in this way: business, personal, family. I have them for everything. And we track them. If it's not trackable, it's not measurable, it's not real. So write it down. How do I know that this is real? Well, guess what? I booked a flight to London, and our family is gonna, big plan for 2025 is spending 30 days in Europe. We're gonna go to London, we're gonna go to Paris, we're gonna go to Amsterdam, we're gonna go to Switzerland, we're gonna go to 3 different cities in Italy, and we're gonna spend 30 contiguous days in Europe. Why? Because it sounds awesome. Who wants to do that? Yeah, hell yeah. You know what? Guess what? Here's a little secret. Create a vacation account tomorrow and pay it like a freaking bill. Pay it like a bill. We pay it every month like a bill. Except that bill, it serves my family. It's awesome. I got to visit, 6, 7, 8 countries this past year, and it was amazing, and it's a huge passion of mine. I am an outdoor junkie, and I spent 3 weeks backcountry hunting between Alaska and Nevada this past year, and I shot a caribou in Alaska and hauled that thing 1.5 miles down a mountainside times 3. Yes, it sucked, and yes, it was awesome. We got to catch fresh fish and land in that freaking water plane, which is an unbelievable experience to fly 100 miles from the middle of nowhere into literally. So we were done on day 4, and they were able to come get us on day 9. And that was our home for 9 days, including 21 hours of straight rain on day 5. It was great. So 2025 business goals, I just want to give you a context to what I'm working on. I'm not trying to brag about it. I don't care how big or small or whatever your goals are. I just want you to know what I'm personally working on and what I hold my team accountable. So we're going to build 60 homes and develop 110, that's missing a 1 in the middle there, in Texas. And I'm standing here, and I say it's like North Mexico because it's just a handful of miles from the border in Texas. But this is a neighborhood we built. All those homes, we built a bunch and developed a bunch, but we're going to build 60 homes. I run a mastermind here that's actually Kansas City local now, and we actually have a handful of our mastermind members in here too. I know Tony's here, and Samson's here. Richard is here. Anybody else in the mastermind in here? We have 50 plus now, 6, 7, 8-figure business owners, investors, and entrepreneurs, and we have world-class speakers every single month on our virtual calls, in person, and 2 live events. And so we're going to grow to 100 members in 2025. This is our real estate team. We actually have 3 agents that are missing, including Mr. Joe Blacksphere back there, who's an absolute stud, and he's going to do 10 million this year, because what's trackable and measurable is attainable. Let's get that 10 million. So we're going to do 43 million at least in sales in 2025, which is actually our first full year of business as a retail agent team. And then our lending company, we specialize in both fix and flip and DSCR loans. We have almost 20 million pending right now in the pipeline, so 50 million should be easy. And add a couple of luxury rentals to our portfolio. And finally cross 100 doors myself in 2025. So that is our little mission for 2025. I'm not here to sell you anything. I don't have anything to sell. I don't have any program, nothing. If you want to be a part of something or we want to do business together, awesome, let's do it. If you learn something, share a picture and tag me. Shoot me a message. That's my mission. I want to make a great impact for you and to walk out of here and have a little better idea of how to do it than you did when you walked in here. If you are scaling a business and you want to be a part of the mastermind, awesome, let's talk. All right? How can we help you? Also, you got to love AI these days. It still can't really spell. So please don't pay attention to the bottom. I have no idea what it says. All right. Yes, I have a ton of experience. Dan mentioned, I've flipped 700 plus houses, built 300 plus homes. We've developed multiple 100-acre parcels in Texas. We ran events for years. We have done hundreds of millions of dollars in business. That's not an understatement. We will also do 100 million in business and top line revenue in our companies in 2025, which is pretty wild. But you know what? Things rarely go as expected. Ever had that experience? You have one plan and the plan has another plan, right? Well, planning is something that I really didn't learn about for many years, even as a leader. And the realization that planning is just the start of saying, like, I have a goal. That's not a plan. Now, how do we get there? And what happens if it doesn't work? And what happens then? And then what's the plan B and the plan C? And so I encourage you, wherever you are on that journey, you're not alone, because this is normal. The frustration of it not working is normal. The wish that it was simpler or that would work, or your dude that you just hired on Tuesday is now quit on Friday, that's happened to me too. And you know what? We get better at hiring, right? We get better at firing faster. We get better at defining our culture and our core values and the things that we want it to be as a team. Because you know what? At the end of the day, if you want to go spend 30 days in Europe or whatever that is to you, you have to build a team around you that can handle and run the business. You have to. How many here wishes they had a team or is scaling a team right now? Almost everybody. It takes a lot of practice. I've been working on this for 20 years, guys. And I keep saying I'm like on 4th level of leadership and I'm now almost average. Because it's hard and it's frustrating sometimes. But don't give up. Refine the goals, refine the values, and keep pursuing the thing that it is that you want. And define what it is, right? So, this is $20 million advice from my $20 million net worth friend, David. He and I were sitting at Kona Grill in Tampa Bay, Florida. And he says to me, Nathan, most of my income came from active activities. And most of my wealth came from investing in real estate. Let that sink in for a second. Most of my income came from active investments. Most of his wealth came from holding real estate. And that actually, I mistyped there. So it's active income from active activities, okay? So I came up with this construct, and this is just a little filler at the top of this talk. There's 2 machines, and we confuse them all the time, okay? It's really freaking simple. There's the cash machine that has to run to pay your freaking mortgage. Take your missus out to dinner, to put your kids in school, right? All that stuff. That is the cash machine. And what happens is we mistake the cash machine and the wealth machine because nearly everyone wants to build their wealth machine, but they forget the cash machine. Think about it. How many times do you know people are like, I'm gonna buy 10 more rentals, but they didn't even have enough cash to buy 1. And now you don't have enough cash to manage the 10 or the 1, let alone the 10, right? It's a huge problem. And a huge problem among my friends and colleagues in the real estate space who try to scale too fast, guilty. I've done it. I've lost a lot of money too. I am not a perfect investor. Go find somebody that's been in the business for 20 years, and I don't think you'll find one. So the difference is we want to have a cash machine that runs. Build a cash machine that runs without you. There are examples. It could be a 9-to-5 job. You don't have to go start a business. A 9-to-5 job that pays a good salary is not a bad option. If you like your job, don't just go quit it. That's crazy. I have a cash machine from my short-term rentals. I have a cash machine from our developments in Texas. I have a cash machine from our lending company. I have one from our other rentals that we own. I have a lot of different things that generate cash every month for me. Then grow and build your wealth and invest in real estate or other things that you want to do, right? If it's stocks, great. If it's real estate, great. If it's Bitcoin that hit 110,000 today, great. Be thoughtful. I've also made lots of money and then done really dumb things with it. That's also stupid. Make it simple. So if you don't have a cash machine that runs and pays your overhead every month, then solve that problem. It's really important. Then you're not worried about paying next month's mortgage payment and the utilities and all the things that you want to do. Take your family out to dinner, whatever it is, right? Have the machine that runs and then go and grow your investments. So I'm talking about deal structure today. I think this is really interesting, and I have a good friend of mine named Eddie Speed who's done 100,000 notes or something. He's insane. And every time he gets up and talks, I have no idea what he's saying. No idea. His deal structures are so complicated and convoluted that far beyond my understanding, that I am just sitting there frustrated trying to write out how in the world he possibly did that. So I wanted to give you a handful of examples that, by the way, has made me and my business partners tens of millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars, and hundreds of millions in real estate. Is that cool?
Yeah, let's see.
All right. So there's a lot of myths about this, and I think it's easy to see like the gurus on or social or whatever, and they a lot of people talk about a lot of different things right now. And by the way, the biggest misnomer I think is still important to have cash in your bank account. So and obviously there's a lot of ways to do that, but that is definitely not true. Now, I started with very little money in my bank account, but I would encourage you not to do that. It makes it much more difficult. And then the creativity of the deal is what makes it interesting. And living within the creativity of a construct, an idea, but also, of course, not breaking the law. And I know a lot of people out there who are not upfront and honest in wholesaling. They're not upfront and honest in sub 2 or seller finance. And let's not do that. Let's not be those people. That real estate gets a bad rap because of folks who don't do honest things. And it's terrible for all of us. So understanding the actual problem and how to go about solving it. Oftentimes we overcomplicate problems and then overcomplicate solutions. It's crazy. We don't have to make it complicated. We have to understand the underlying problem of the deal, okay? And then always seek a win-win scenario for everyone. I am a firm believer in this. And my coach, Gary, talks about this, and he says there's givers and takers and matchers in the world. I am a firm believer that when we put out in the universe, whether it's a God thing or a karma thing or whatever thing, that it comes back. I'm a firm believer in that. And I watch it happen over and over in my life. And the more that you give, the more you get, and you will not convince me otherwise. It's important. So let's make sure that we're thoughtful of that when we put these deals together. So check this out. So we're gonna look at 5 different deals. Some are more complex than others, and I'll start with a simple one. So I actually own this house right now. I bought it from Rex. I funded it with a private lender of mine, and I literally have this going right now. And we have our contractors in the back of the room, which is pretty cool, Brian and Beth. So we bought it off market and acquired the property with hard money. Brought in a contractor, refinanced with a DSCR loan. We'll have 10 or 20 grand in the deal. This is the classic BRRRR strategy, right? We've all heard of that, right? Buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. Now check this out. So I bought it for about $350. We put about $72,000, give or take. We had 12 and 2 on our interest. And this is what's really interesting. I was able to have a wire from my lender the day that we closed for 100% of the purchase and the rehab, which when you hear about that, a lot of times we think that that is not real. Well, I have an established relationship and I've done millions of dollars with this lender. He's a good friend of mine. He's got lots of cash. I'm always putting cash into more deals. He says, great, let's do some business together. 12 and 2. So he financed the purchase and the renovation. So it wrote $0 out of my pocket. Okay? We'll turn the property in 90 days or less. Today's ARV is $525. We'll have 10 or 20 grand, into the cash, depending on time, the cost of money, utilities, etc. But we will have roughly, $90,000 to $100,000 in equity in that deal. Not bad for 90 days, huh? Would you guys trade 90 days for $100,000 in equity in a house that does 75, 80 grand in? We have 10 of these, by the way, that do this. The one thing I think a lot of times people forget in the short term, midterm, is the cost of the furniture as well. And we almost always have that cost in our deals. It's almost always out of pocket. But this is a great method to do it. Why did I like this deal? It's in a highly desirable neighborhood. One of the things you'll notice about over and over is that our price points are higher than most people. I'll tell you about this later, why this is important to us. So it's a highly desirable neighborhood. We had no cash out of pocket at purchase. So we're continuing to cash flow on all of our other properties as this thing's going down. And so we're going to use income that we made from our other properties to be able to acquire this property. So I'll have cash out of pocket, but it'll be cash flow from my other properties that we own. And we can burn almost all of it with almost 100 grand in equity in the deal. And then we rent these out as midterm rentals. And you know what? Even though Kansas City decided to have a really stupid law against short-term rentals, really stupid. We went from 1,700 to a few hundred. Guess what? How many people own these big, giant 3, 4, 5,000 square foot homes with 6 or 7 bedrooms in it? Not too many. So guess what? We crush it with these. We absolutely crush it. So, number one, it's just a straight burr strategy, right? Purchase, renovation. By the way, if you have a question, just pause. Let's talk about the deal if you have a question or something that I can help you with. Dan.
How do you fund the renovations during the deal?
In this particular, so he said, how do we fund the renovations? In this particular deal, we actually got it from the lender as well. So we got 100% purchase and 100% renovation up front.
That's great.
Yeah. Now, there's a lot of different lenders and there's a lot of different tools. There's a number of lenders in the room. Everybody has their own method to this, but it's not too hard to get, say 90% of that purchase price and 100% of construction or something like that. There's a lot of varying degrees, but certainly the private money piece is the cheapest. I've done loans with Jeff and SLS folks, and we turned them around in a couple days and had a wire to my account. I think even sometimes when we didn't have documents in place. But again, we had a history of doing deals. I didn't say that. We had them very shortly after. Please take that from the record. Okay, any other questions on this deal? So this is deal number 2. So this property had been listed for some time on MLS. It's there forever, and it was not selling. It was in a great neighborhood. It was kind of one of those weird anomaly ones. And especially in the time frame of when we found this house, it made no sense why it wasn't selling. So they already had a long-term loan in place with a great bank. And so we bought this property sub 2. And you'll notice a reoccurring theme here. I don't like to have a lot of my cash in the deals. So I didn't want to bring cash. And all we paid for was furniture. Okay? So check this out. Purchase price, I couldn't remember exactly, and I was throwing this together today. By the way, I'm here tonight because I'm fired up to help you. I am actually having heart surgery on Thursday, believe it or not. And I talked to my wife about being here tonight and exerting a lot of energy because I have had some difficulty, and I have a heart valve that is not operating, but it was more important to me to hold up my end of the bargain to be in this room tonight with you than it was to bail on Dan and you guys, and one person to take away something. So I wanted to be here. So if you're a praying person, at 8 a.m. on Thursday, I'll be having robotic open heart surgery, which is not what I planned for 2025. But here we are. So this one we purchased in the low 300s. Renovation was zero. The thing was spotless. It was an awesome property. So guess what? We had no money. Underlying seller had a long-term note, so we got to keep that in place. Okay, so you can interchange sub 2 on a lot of different things. I like to have very specific rules in these things, particularly like in this case, I know him and we still have a relationship. I am not a huge fan of sub 2 personally, and just buying them, and especially not buying them and then reselling them in seller finance, I'm not a big fan of. So seller had a second mortgage. He wanted to make a little cash on the deal because I negotiated him hard on this deal, because I'm like, bro, you're not selling it, you're eating a couple grand a month, just sell me the house. Well, guess what? He's like, I have to make this return. My wife is going to murder me. I said, okay, let's work it out. So I got a no interest or low interest second mortgage of like 30 grand. And going into it, our ARV was 425. We spent 20 or so on the furnishings, and it rents for 65 to 70,000 annually. So in this case, we were able to take a deal that we purchased sub 2. Does that make sense? No? Did you say no? Did I hear no? What that means is the seller, so let's say it's 123 Main Street, owns the house. Okay? So 123 Main Street has a mortgage balance of whatever it was, 310,000 or whatever it was. So I take over the note, that mortgage, I take over that note and mortgage as it is. So if it's already 6.5% or whatever the interest rate was, and it's already been running for 2 years out of 25 years, so all of the things that are with that mortgage, I take over as it is today. Does that make sense? So then I come in as the buyer on top of that. So I'm still taking the property into my name, and we actually had a conversation with banks, so they knew. I wanted to make sure we weren't going to have somebody calling our note due in a year or two, because that can happen in a subject too if they find out you have taken ownership of that. So we had a conversation with the bank. We left the note in place, and then we put a second note, small note, to the seller, and we pay that as well. So it's a couple $100 a month, plus the couple $1,000s a month for his mortgage. So call it $2,500 plus utilities, that's $3,000. And we rent $65,000 to $70,000 annually. So you can do the math. Probably nets $1,500 a month. Bless you. Does that make sense? Sorta? Or is that clear? So you can take somebody who already has a property in place, and this gets sexier over time too, because the longer that property's been in place, or the interest rate, like let's say for instance, it's a 4% note or a 5% note, there's a big fancy word called arbitrage. So you're actually a better rate today than you would in that mortgage than you would if you went out, which is why we didn't do that, right? Because I'd be paying more money for that same note and mortgage, okay? And the small second mortgage, I didn't want to write a $30,000 check to get into a house with not a ton of equity in it. And so I said, cool, I'll pay you a couple $100s a month, and we'll do that for 5 years or whatever it was to run it down. And so he's happy because he gets his money. I'm happy because I got the house, and we didn't have to put any cash other than the financing. Any questions on this one? Dan?
Yeah, on these, so are you just doing like 30-day plus midterm rentals?
We have both midterm and short-term. Okay. So anywhere we can legally run, we don't try to skirt the law or anything like that, so it's not worth it. And I own multiple houses with actual permits on them as well in KC, as well as outside of KC. So yeah, we target luxury properties, say 400 to 600. I see you back there. I'll come right over to you. We average like $400,000 to $600,000 properties, and target to make $1,000 to $2,000 a month net per property. So, and if you think about this too, in a short or in a long-term property, how many people off of a rental?
Not much. Not many.
I don't know anybody in one house. You do? $1,000 a month? Is it paid off?
No.
Well, yeah, multiple doors. I mean, and I'm sure those are pretty good numbers. Yeah, single family, but room home, yeah. So outside of like pad split or a group home or something like that, we crush it. And by the way, people keep saying in whatever is dead. Well, yeah, for every person that owned an 800 square foot 3-bed home that went and put it on the market and put crappy furnishings in it and took cell phone pictures, yes, it didn't work. But guess what? We tried to think differently about this and figure out how could we have properties that not everybody has, and guess what? Who wants to go get a 5,000 square foot house? Somebody that can pay for it. I didn't put it up here, but I took my old home that I used to live in, and we bought it for a little over $500,000 in 2017. It's worth well over north of $1 million now. And we'll do over $150,000 in short-term, mid-term rental just out of that one house in 2025. So we make more than the average, salaries of a lot of people in one home with just doing the right marketing and the right setup in that house. Is this helpful so far? All right, so why I like this deal is in a highly desirable neighborhood. I already had a great long-term loan, no cash out of pocket, but the seller still got some long-term return with a small second. And this bottom one is my favorite. It's high appreciating. And you know what? I more and more think about the return on my time. So if I do one house that I have a low return on my time, or I have one house that has a high return on my time, which one would I rather do? High return all day. I'll show you some math here towards the end of this. So deal 3, we bought this from somebody who may or may not be in the room. That name might rhyme with Seth. So they came to us and said, hey, we got this house and this borrower defaulted. And we said, cool, tell us what's going on, we can help. By the way, imagine doing business with your lender. Imagine doing business with your title company. Imagine doing business with your realtor, your inspector, your contractor. Guess what? Take care of your people. What a novel idea. So guess what? Theme of the night. Their borrower defaulted. And so guess what? We brought in a bank for 80% of the value on the deal. They financed anything over 80%. I said, hey, I'll buy it from you, but I don't want to put any of my cash in it. Did you hear that? 3 deals in a row. And guess what? They said, cool, let's do it. And they brought in and made sure that the construction in that house was immaculate. I think it's 6 bedrooms, like 5,000 square foot house. It's beautiful. So day 1, rehab's done. Check this out. So purchase was roughly $440, give or take. Renovation, $0. You know my favorite renovation? The one I don't have to do. No offense to the contractors. Terms, we got a bank loan at 80%. Seller carried a second mortgage, which was only a couple, I don't know, I don't remember exactly how much it was, maybe 30, 40 grand. We had 0 cash out. ARV now, it's north of 550. It's just a couple of years ago. So we went in, we didn't have a ton of equity in the deal, but guess what we had? We had cash flow in a highly appreciating area and into the deal. So we spent $20,000 or so on furnishings. It rents $80,000 to $90,000 annually. We get $8 to $9 a month out of that house. And it's booked all the time. Sports figures, soccer team, teams that come into town, contractors. This home crushes it. Guess what? Why do I like this deal? It's in an up-and-coming neighborhood. So it was a little different than the other ones that were definitely clearly having high appreciation. So we took a little bit more of a gamble. But guess what? It's actually gone up more over time because there's been a lot of development in this corridor. And we knew it pretty well, and we said, let's do it. Okay? The lender didn't want to own it. Lenders are not in the business of owning real estate. They are in the business of lending it, right? So they said, hey, let's get this off our books. House was incredible. It was beautiful. There was tile everywhere. And so we had a great asset going into the deal. And by the way, if you want to be in the Airbnb short-term rental game, it is not about becoming a place for someone to live. It is about guest experience. Guess what that means? It should look nice. It should smell nice. It should have fun things to do. If it's a big old house like that, probably a hot tub. Maybe some fun games. This is important. When you look at actual comps on like Airbnb or short-term, mid-term rentals, you can literally add, sometimes 5 or 10% or more annually by adding like a hot tub. So imagine on a $90,000 property and you spent what's a hot tub? $3,000 from Costco? Would you trade $3,000 for an extra 10 a year? That's a hell yes for me. I'll do that. So high appreciating area, even without a ton of equity, to start just 2 years, we have over 20% equity in our deal. This was an awesome property and an awesome deal, and this really got us thinking how to creatively do it. All right, check this out. I bet you everybody in this room could do this deal. I had a guy that worked for me who came to me and said, hey Nathan, I am about to lose my house, and I put a ton of money into it, and it's my family home, and my wife and kids are here, and the people who own it have told me for years they were going to sell it to me, and they haven't. And I'm about to lose it. And I can't buy it right now because I don't have the credit or whatever it was. And he said, can you help me? And I said, of course. So I asked him all the details, property address, what's it worth, etc. And guess what? So I came in and I bought the house and I wrote a lease option to him. I'll explain that in a second. So check this out. Purchase was $80,000. Renovation, my favorite. No offense, contractors, $0. ARV at purchase, $180,000. So I had $100,000 in equity the day I bought it, and then I took $30,000 out tax-free, and I sold it in a lease option back to him for $140,000, which was $40,000 less than the value of the property. Think about that. I didn't own it. I walked into $100,000 in equity, so you think the bank was upset about that loan? No. I get $30,000 tax-free because I take it out as a cash out refinance, and then I turn around and put a lease option, and by the way, a lease option has two parts. It has a lease and an option to purchase. And so the lease is the amount that they pay per month, right? So that's just like a rental amount. And then you have the option, which some contracts go two directions, right? So like if you were to go buy a home tomorrow and you use the Heartland MLS contract, that is two directions, right? I agree seller and I agree buyer, and we both have responsibilities in the deal. Does that make sense? In a lease option contract, it really goes one way. We've already set the stipulations. The buyer or the current leaser does not have to buy it, but they have a certain amount of time that they can call that option, right? So if he doesn't call that option, then I get to renegotiate on the sales price. So we had a 2-year lease option, and he will have the 2 years to purchase this, or there will be a different contract. Does that make sense? So in the meantime, think about my risk. Let's say he defaults. I have a ton of equity. I can turn around and rent it. I can turn around and sell it. I can turn around and seller finance it, whatever. Let's say he stays for another 2 or 3 years. I renegotiate and I say, hey, I tell you what, I'll give you a little better deal. By the way, this house is now worth $220. So it's not worth $180, it's worth $220 now. So I'll say, all right, I tell you what, I'll do $170, $180. So now I have even more cash that I will make in the deal. He still gets the house $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 under value, and still gets what he wanted, which is to not lose his house. So imagine, by the way, this is like the 3rd time I've done this for a friend, and I've always done them the same way. I might even buy it for a friend. If you have a friend who's really struggling, they got $5,000 or $10,000 to put in a deal, you can use that as your lease option. By the way, there are some people who go try to steal people's money by having terms that people can't really accomplish. I am not a fan of that. I know people who seller finance houses for absurd dollar amounts higher than the value of the house. I am not a fan of that. But in a lease option, let's say in this price point, for him, I hooked him up, but we want, say $2,500 or $5,000 in the option. So that is what's his place to purchase this property from me. Does that make sense? Yeah. And then guess what? That $2,500 or $5,000 goes towards his purchase price when he closes. And if he doesn't close, then that money comes back to me. But I will never do that to somebody who I do not feel like they can close. That's why I typically do friends and family, because they're not going to screw me because I know them, and I'm also in control of their house, right? Who has questions about this one? Nobody? Yeah.
First of all, I appreciate you giving me your number. this guy was going to lose the house?
So the question is, he was going to lose it. So the family that owned the house, like the grandfather had died. So the grandfather was like, hey, cool, stay in the house as long as you want. The kids were like, hey, we want our money. And so that was what caused the motion to have to do something. And then it also required me to have a conversation with those kids and say, hey, by the way, I'm not some like scammer dude. Here's my bank statement, here's my proof of funds, and here's a contract, let's close it. And so there was some negotiation with the family to make them feel more comfortable. But in the end of the day, so we went back to that win-win question, right? What's the win-win? Well, they wanted their money. They wanted to honor the dollar amount that they said they would sell it to him for, and he didn't want to lose it. Does that make sense? Well, he was renting it. I think it was probably, no. So he was still renting.
Okay.
And the people, he wanted to buy it from the sellers, and the sellers wanted to sell it to him, but he could not qualify for a mortgage, but I could. And so he was going to lose it, and he spent all this time and money renovating it and make it hit the house his home, his family's home. And so instead of him losing that, he said, hey, can you help me? And so we came in, we had a contract with the seller, right? So there's an A-B contract. So seller's A, I'm B. So I close it, and then now I have a B to C transaction, which is that lease option. So I now am the seller, and I'm selling it in a lease option to him as the buyer.
So the real problem is it wasn't he couldn't make the payment, he just couldn't swing the deal.
He couldn't swing, yeah. So he could make the payment, he just couldn't get on the loan. Yes.
Was this a DSCR loan?
This was a DSCR loan. And the great thing is now we have relationships with our banks where whether it's seller finance or lease option or whatever, they already know. We tell them like, hey, we're going to seller finance this, we're going to lease option this. So they're eyes wide open going into it. And And that lender we've done millions and millions of dollars with. And so like, oh, cool, you want to do another loan? We're like, let's do it. Did I see another question? Yes, ma'am.
The time that you closed, what was that time frame of you doing the cash out refinance?
Okay, actually, this is a really great question. So her question was, what's your name?
Jamie.
Jamie? Jamie had a great question. So what was the timeline from the time that we purchased it to the refinance? So I forgot to put this in here. So we actually used hard money to purchase it. So again, I didn't have any money out of my pocket. And what lender do you talk to that says, hey, can I have 80 grand for like 2 weeks with $100,000 in equity? He's like, all day. So at close, I get 80,000 to close. I have no money in it. And I immediately send to my bank, who has no seasoning on the loan, because this can be an issue depending on the loans. And we are in the loan business now. And I can tell you, sometimes this can be difficult, but I have great relationships with a number of community banks, and they don't care. The biggest issue we've run into with the community banks is running into the ceiling of what they'll lend to us. So we have had that issue. So we used a hard money loan on the front, which is cash, right? So that could be from your dad's HELOC. It could be from your neighbor's IRA, right? Self-directed IRA. It could be from however you want to fund that thing. You could do it that way. And then renovation zero, it was in good shape, so it wasn't an issue. There was no issues on the refinance. And so all we were waiting on then was an appraisal. So what was the appraisal going to come in at? And then what could I pull out on the cash outside of that? And then I just told the person that we at least optioned it to, I was like, hey, whatever my mortgage is, I'll put $200 over the top. So I cover, my monthly nut and make a couple $100. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Somebody sell you the house for 80 grand. If right off the bat it's worth 180 and it needs no renovation.
The question is, why would somebody sell you a house for 80 that's worth 180?
With no rehab involved, zero. I don't understand that.
What I've found is, and Dan's in this business, Rex is in this business, there's a lot of people in this room in this business. I know Joe Blacksphere, he bought a house recently off the MLS that was mispriced by what? 40, 50, 100? How much was it mispriced by? So everyone has a different motivation for their problem, right? They wanted cash.
Why would you sell it for 80 when you could get 140? Why would you do that? I don't understand that.
Well, the family, so he's asking why would they do that? Well, first of all, I'm not them, so I can't. Sure, but they wanted to honor the obligation they made to Absolutely.
I'm with you.
But there are also circumstances where, families don't want people to come into a house, right? So let's,
Step in and fulfill it.
absolutely. Like, let's say it's a hoarder situation or a family member died and they're like, I don't want to be in that house. I would rather Dan come in and buy it or Rex come in and buy it, and I don't have to deal with it. And sometimes time value is more important than money value.
Yeah, I get all that. I've done it many times. I get it.
Yeah,
I get that part, but sometimes they just want to turn and burn it.
sure.
Done.
And in this case, it was like the honor of the family saying, hey, we're going to help you. And so when he wanted to buy it, he just couldn't get it done. By the way, you had a question and I totally forgot to come back, I think, wearing a hat.
I was thinking about like hospitals and stuff that rent 6-bedroom homes, so put a bunch of nurses in.
Yes, we've actually found that there's a lot of different cohorts of people that will do that. So whether it's a group of nurses or, in short-term rentals, girls' weekend or whatever. In my house out south, we get a bunch of contractors that come and stay, and they're working big jobs and making fat money, and they want to live in a cool spot. So, say again? How do you find them? Well, it just so happens, I didn't make this about partnerships, but I'll just talk about that briefly. So I've had a few partnerships that have gone really poorly, and I've had a lot of great partnerships over the years. And this is another great partnership. And a student of mine was a short-term rental manager, and he'd been doing it for a number of years. And after we got done with my stuff, coaching, which, by the way, have nothing to sell you, and I do not do any coaching anymore, so it's not even available. He said, hey, what else could we do? And I said, why don't we buy some houses? Well, guess what? 3 years later, we have a multi-million-dollar portfolio, him and I, and we make $40,000 to $50,000 a month top-line revenue off of those doors, just a handful of them. I think we're at 9 with the one that we just bought. And we average $40,000 to $50,000 a month top line. That's not net, so that's gross revenue in. But we still average $10,000 to $20,000 a month off of 10 doors, which is pretty incredible. And then peak season, we've had $35,000 months, but that's not normal. So it's all about the experience. I own a couple of houses in Texas as well that are in a different partnership, similar deal. We built this baller house, 3,000 square foot, big pool. And again, it just attracts a different clientele, which is why we said, I'm dumping all the small ones and I'm keeping all the big ones, period. And that doesn't have to be your model. I know people killing it with, $60,000 Section 8 rentals. I know people killing it with $400,000 Johnson County homes. I know people killing it with short-term rentals. It doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. It matters if you actually take the focus and energy to solve the problem long enough that it doesn't whoop your ass and you can stay in the game. That's really what matters. That's been my experience. All of my friends that are very wealthy, they have had a lot of those moments. It does not go like this, ever. It's a slow and steady burn and grow. All right, so why I liked it, tons of equity. Any other questions on that one? Or in general? Yes. Yes, so the question was, if it was worth 180, why did I sell it for 140? Because I wanted to do my best to take care of him too. And in the midst of that situation, I wanted to leave equity in the deal in that kind of win-win scenario to say like, hey, I appreciate the opportunity. I will take care of you. You take care of me. He never calls me. This is a great question. Absolutely. On a normal lease option, I would never do that, ever. So on a seller finance or a lease option, I would typically go, say, 5% over the current day value if it's 1 year, and I'd go like, say, 10% if it's 2 years. Because I'm gonna build in my price, my profit, right? Because basically, I'm no longer in control of that when I seller finance the house. So on the lease option side, I would do 5 or 10%. So in that example, I would have done, say, 195 as a sales price. The other thing to remember too in these things, and people they forget, so if you have a commercial mortgage in place, many of those commercial mortgages have a 5-year or a 3-year or a 7-year reset. And so you need to know in your seller finance or lease option, you're having to make a decision on today's interest rate, but you don't know what the tomorrow rate is. And so I always try to make sure that I am arbitraging, which means if I have a 7% rate on my note, I'm going to sell it at an 8 or a 9% rate on the back end. What's your second question? So I believe that the rate we got at the time was like 6.5. So it was a 6.5 on a 25-year AM. The other interesting thing you can do, if you think they're going to stay long term, which again is my outcome that I want. I don't want to steal, or putting somebody in a house that they really can't afford it. So if I put the underlying note on a 25-year AM and I put them on a 30-year AM and I can still cash flow, guess what? There's 5 years of cash flow. So I go from, say, $1,500 a month rents that maybe equal $200 or $300 a month or whatever it is to $1,500, which is sexy. So you can really juice your returns if you put a 25-year note on your side and you put a 30-year note on their side. Does that make sense? So I always try to arbitrage the rate, which is the big fancy word for the difference between the two rates, interest rates, and then the time frame for the mortgage. Did I lose anybody, or are we tracking? Cool. Any other questions on this or anything else so far? You want to see a deal that will net over $10 million on in a couple of years? Yeah. This is my favorite. Okay. By the way, thank you, AI. It actually spelled creative finance. Shocking. Okay. This is a deal in Texas. We own this right now. Okay. This is a land development deal, and it has a couple of pieces and a couple of components. So we used our 506c debt fund. Does everybody know what a 506c is? No. Okay. There are a number of vehicles. Have you heard of a syndication, say? So like somebody raises money to buy an apartment. Well, we did the same kind of thing in a 506c, except we did ours as a debt fund instead of as a raise for an apartment. And check this out. You can actually do a 506c that is evergreen. What does that mean? It means, as opposed to if I go buy 123 Main Street apartments that are 100 units and I go raise $5 million for that deal, I am stuck one and only, one and done in that deal. Are you tracking with me so far? Anybody not? You can say something. You don't have to be. Let's see. There we go. Yes.
So what you're saying is like you can raise this money and do whatever you want with it. Like it doesn't have to be with one deal.
That's exactly right. So evergreen means that, guess what? If we have $5 million in our fund and we go lend $2 million or $5 million or whatever million, and then we get that deal and we full cycle that money, we can have our $5 million back to do another deal. That's pretty sweet. Because guess what? These things cost, $10, $15, $20,000 to set up. And so it makes life much easier, simpler, and more cost effective to do it once. Okay, so we have a 506c debt fund. By the way, there's also a million ways to structure these things, but we did ours as there's a preferred return, which is 8%, and then we pay a percentage on the money that we make, which is 50-50 to ourselves and to our investors. You can make these very complicated or you can make them very simple. Ours is very simple. It's 50% to us, 50% to them. So remember though, the deals, like if it's an apartment, most of the time that is equity. They own, say, 70 or 80% of the deal. In our case, it is not. They own 0% of this deal. They own 100% of their cash and the return that we're paying them. Do you understand the difference? Yes? No? Words? You understand? Say again? Exactly. No equity. 100% return on their capital. Okay? So we got a bank loan for the development. So here's the other interesting thing. So we use our fund to buy the 64 acres, and then we can actually go to a bank because we can, what's the fancy word for putting yourself into second position? Subjugate. I think that's it. Whatever. It's an S word that sounds something like updegate. Okay, so you can put yourself in second position. So guess what? The bank is like, sweet. We have very low risk in that deal. So we came in with our debt fund. We're making our investors money. We also make money a little bit off of our fund. And then we go to a bank and they help pay for the cost of the development. We run the development of the land with our partners, and there are 249 lots in our development. Check this out. So Our ground was around $1 million. In our first phase, it's 3.8 million, and it'll be a little less because that has all of the infrastructure costs that we had to put in for the whole development rolled into that on the front end because that was what the city required. So we funded with our debt fund, construction loan for the infrastructure with the bank. And by the way, we take enough money. So in a debt fund, it's also it's called a PPM, which is private placement memorandum. It's basically the instructions on what you can do, can't do with the money. What kind of things can you invest in? Where can you invest in? What can you use it for, right? And so there's a lot of details that happen in that PPM, and that tells the investor what is happening with it. Okay, so in our PPM, it says we can do this. We use that for the acquisition of the land. We also typically over allocate some capital, so it pays for the ongoing monthly expenses to the bank for that, say, 12 or 18 months. Does that make sense? So now we've covered our capital cost. And guess what? Don't forget, we borrowed it from our own fund. So we're making money on the borrowing cost because we're lending it at a higher rate of return than what we're paying for it. And then we make money in the acquisition cost because once those lots are completed, shovel ready is the fancy term. Now, guess what? Those lot costs all in, when we're done, it's actually under $30,000, but for simple math, we're into them for $30,000. We'll have 250 lots, or 249. We'll sell them or they'll be worth over 50, somewhere between 51 and 55K, but I just put 50 for simple math. 250 lots by 20,000 is 5 million in gross profit. But wait, it doesn't include all the homes we will build and sell on them. So guess what? I guess I didn't put the math in there. Oh yeah, so it's the largest development deal we've ever done, provides several years of work for our team. We have many exit strategies to build on those lots, to sell those lots, so we could exit for 5 million and the sale of those lots, or overall, after building all the homes, we will net north of $11 million by utilizing a creative strategy of our debt fund over a bank loan in a development deal. How'd you like to make 11 million bucks in one deal? So, and we utilize all of our fund dollars for this. That enables us to be very creative with how we do those deals. So guess what? Those 10 or 15 duplexes we're going to add to our portfolio this year, we're going to utilize our fund for that. Our fund will come in and pay for construction costs. So guess what? We can buy the land, we can pay for the construction. We go to the same sweet bank and say, would you like to give us more money? And they say, yes, we would. And so we burn to those things. And we utilize all of our fund dollars to get into the deals that make money on both sides of it. Yes, ma'am. So the question is, do we do any development in Kansas City? The short answer is currently no. We have built a few hundred homes in Kansas City from like 2020 to 2024. And frankly, we got our butts kicked. And I lost a fair amount of money in a number of projects in Kansas City. And the operational piece, and I mentioned earlier about the partnerships, and our Texas part has been incredible, and the operator is incredible. And in Kansas City, we didn't have such good fortune. And so we did not do very well. And so we shut down. And actually, I want that too, because I think a lot of times our egos get in the way of decision making sometimes when something isn't going right, when it isn't going well. And my encouragement to you is if it's really not going well and in your heart you know you need to stop, don't keep putting that off. And I wish, so in 2021, I believe it was, we owned like almost 60 homes. We were flipping 10 to 15 houses a month, and we had done 700 flips in 6 years. And I owned like 60 homes, and our organization had gotten over our skis. We went too fast. And so all of a sudden we looked into our portfolio of homes to renovate, and we had a bunch of stinkers, and it really sucked. And we lost north of $1 million in real money. I told you at the beginning, I am not perfect. So I've learned how to make 11, but I've also lost over $1 million too in real deals. And so my lesson in that was I have to start small, and I have to scale small and test small And that made all the difference for me in our businesses. Do that, we've been very successful, and we haven't done that, we've gotten our butts kicked. And so in the first year of building in Kansas City, we were like the top 10 builders or something, which we were used to flipping like 125 to 150 houses in a year. And so we thought 50 was no big deal. Well, it took a lot more than what we thought. So all that to say, would I build stuff in Kansas City? Sure. But I much prefer now doing partnerships with extraordinary people. And I just recently got invited into a really incredible boutique hotel project. It's a multi-million-dollar project, and I've gotten invited for other development and apartment deals. And so by nature of talking about the things that we do and how we serve and help other people, then what do we say? Karma comes around, right? And so I continue to see those deal opportunities, and the cool part is now they have more zeros on them. And so that has been a big driver. So there's so many ways you can use creative finance to do more deals, hold more, and make more, and build more wealth. And I want you to roll out of here tonight not confused or not unsure of the manner in which you can do. I used to attend masterminds all over the country, and I would sit there in rooms with all these incredible people, and I would have like 100 new ideas. And then I would try to go implement 50 of them, half of which I texted my team frantically while at the airport. It's a bad idea. Pick one, pick two. And then guess what? Have a thing like what I created with my business partner. Have a parking lot for ideas. And you know what? If you have a bunch of ideas, that's really great. Who cares? Go back and work on the one that is not quite there yet. And then if you have an opportunity, you have some space. My coach, Gary Harper, says, guess what? You want to start another business? Great. You can't be responsible in the first one. You need somebody else in there to help run it. In the book Traction, they call it an integrator. If you have an integrator to run the company, then great, go build a new one. Until you do, you haven't earned the right. And that has been a huge, huge learning lesson. And the more that I stick on my line of things I understand and what I'm good at, guess what? Smoother sales, better deals, make more money, have more fun. What an idea. So I've started seeking bigger deals on the development side and the holding side. And I wanted to mention this to you guys. By the way, I'm really happy with the flow of these deals. Was it cool to see like what a real $10, $11 million deal is like? Is that cool? Have you seen something like this before? Yes, no? Absolutely. So check this out. This is why I stopped buying crappy houses. And no offense to you if you like to buy crappy houses. The better houses appreciate faster. The other thing I didn't put on here, they are less work. They have clientele that I like to deal with. They pay their rent. $200,000 in a 3%, which I remember buying houses in Ruskin for 30 grand, which are now close to 200K, which is wild, or maybe more in some cases. But don't try to, we're not trying to in a particular area. I'm just trying to use this as an example, okay? So a $200,000 house that we say we did the whole BRRRR strategy, right? Let's say we went through the whole process. It's one property. We do all of the same work. We have to buy the house. We have to fund the house. We have to construct the house. We have to rent the house. We have to refinance the house. And let's say it on average appreciates at 3%, which historically in Kansas City it was just sub 3%. Okay, so 3 times 2 is 6. $6,000 a year if you can't see the K in between the TV. 500K houses, which historically the ones we bought have appreciated far north of 5%. It's been more like 8 to 12%. But I wanted to make it simple and conservative. So 5 times 5 is 25. Same house, right? So we have one widget here, box 1, one widget here, box 2. Would you rather do the same work for $25,000 a year in appreciation or $6,000 a year in appreciation? Anybody? 25! And if I own 10 houses, which I happen to, that are 500K or more, equals $250,000 a year versus $60,000 a year. So if you think about what does it take me to become a millionaire? Which I think a lot of times people want to do that. I'm gonna be a real estate millionaire. Anybody here? A millionaire? Yeah. I became a multimillionaire because of real estate. So if I own 10 houses that are worth 500K, 250 a year versus 600. So think about that. If you continue to appreciate at 5% in 4 years, not including any sort of tax advantages or pay down, you have $1 million in equity. Think about that. 4 years, 10 houses. Even if you bought one a year for 10 years right now, it would change your life. By the way, I'm averaging like 80,000 per door, maybe a little more. So that's also 10 homes. That's $800,000 a year in top line rent. Think about how many single families you'd have to have for that. So that's why we focused on those bigger homes, faster appreciation and higher rent dollar amounts. And it's drastically changed our cash flow in our investments. Now, I will still buy, like the ones I mentioned in Texas, that are new construction duplexes. They don't have the same kind of cash flow, but it's harder for me to find these houses than it is for me to go buy 20 duplex lots and go build them, which is why we'll still go build those, and we use it as a tax shelter more than we use it for any cash flow, because they don't really cash flow that much. But guess what? I don't need to solve the cash flow problem. We talked about this at the beginning. Cash machine, wealth machine. Those just sit in my wealth machine. See the difference now? Cash machine, wealth machine. And you know what? These are sick because they fit in both. All right, so I hope I've helped you inspire you to think a little differently about how to put these together. If you have questions, of course, I'm happy to answer them tonight. I hope I've challenged some of your thinking. I hope I have inspired you to take action, which is, I say offense is my love language, because I hate people going to things like this. This is why I started my mastermind. It's because I wanted to be around people who didn't just talk about it, they did it. Offense is my love language. Don't tell me you're going to do something and then keep talking about it without any action. That's called being a liar. And also, it's incongruent, your words and your brain. And if you are telling your brain one thing and you are doing something else, you know it, subconsciously and consciously. And you are out of alignment and you will not be successful. It's not possible. So, are there any other questions that you have for me tonight? Beth?
What is your cost to sit there?
Absolutely. So the question is, what do we net on our midterm rentals? I'll give you a couple examples. So on the first or second example, that was the one that we did, the sub 2, it's one of the lowest performing ones we have because it has the least number of bedrooms. And I think we net under our $1,000 a month, but I think we net, around $750 a month on that one. On our highest producing one, besides the one that was my personal rental, which absolutely slays unreasonable cash flow, the house we bought was actually a few years ago. No wholesaler wanted to touch it. And it's in this really fancy neighborhood, in this really fancy city called Blue Springs. And it's 6 bedrooms, 5,000 square feet. It has a pool, and we will do like 110, 120 a year out of that house. And we bought it, very similar numbers in the low threes. We put $100,000 into it and refinanced it. And we make, north of $2,000 to $4,000 a month, and then on average, and in the summertime, we can blow, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 out of that house sometimes. So, but our target is $1,000 to $2,000 per door per month net on the short-term, midterm. The other thing to note on the midterm is, unlike a short-term where you can have 3, 5, 7, whatever night stay, we expect to have longer vacancies, because to be in Kansas City, Missouri, you have to have a 30-day lease. So, in other words, you might have 2 or 3 weeks that your house sits vacant, but we rent to baseball players, Royals players, Chiefs players, because guess what? Where do they want to stay? In a big baller house. And so we rent those homes at a high dollar value, and so it might sit for a month vacant, but then we have 7 months of $8,000 a month or whatever it is. Does that answer your question? Awesome. Yes, sir.
What's like your target? What do you say those people?
So the question is, if you're looking at the MLS and there's a property on, let's say 90, 120, 180 days or whatever, what are some ways that you can sub to or otherwise? So we've bought a number of houses like this, and especially when we were buying high volume, days on market is huge. And especially right now in the marketplace, if you have a really great home in a really great area, they're still selling. But if you have an okay house in an okay area, you are probably struggling to sell the house. And so we would just have a conversation. And the way that I typically approach that, what's your name? Keegan? Keegan. So Keegan, the way that we typically would approach it was we would give them a couple options. So hey, I could buy that house at, let's say it's $200,000 retail or whatever. I could buy it tomorrow for $160. You seller finance it to me. Because maybe they've sat on the house forever and like, hey, and especially if they're an investor, that's sexy all day. Hey, why don't we extend your cash flow for another 10 years and you seller finance that property to me for $170, and I'll put $10,000 down and you seller finance it to me. And then of course, if it's a newer home, that's I think more where the sub 2 works better, other than the fact that if it's really new, then the interest rate's not great. And you also want to think about what your exit strategy is with it on the sub 2 side and how much cash. So the thing that I struggle with is, like, let's say there's a deal where it's a really nice house in a really nice neighborhood, but they don't have much equity, but they're, say, in the rears 20 grand. So I'm actually going into that deal with really what is potentially negative equity. And so that's where I really would be very careful on the sub 2 side. And I would pick the cash version first and the seller finance version first. And then I would be very thoughtful on the sub 2 and make sure if you're going to do that, also you have the paperwork in order and you have open conversation and dialogue with the seller and what the exit strategy is and that kind of stuff. Does that make sense? So I go into deals and we'll have multiple offer scenarios. And oftentimes, if people are highly motivated, then they'd rather take the cash and take 10,000 less or 20,000 less or whatever it is, and you can just bring in your hard money situation. Did you have a question?
I did. Yeah, how are you on these nicer mid short-term houses? How are you refinancing them typically?
So the question is, how are we refinancing the midterms? So one thing that has happened over the last 6 to 12 months is banks have tightened up a little bit on the lending side. And so there have been some concerns about the short-term, midterm, as far as what they would lend to. So even though we could show a history of that, some of the banks were difficult and wanted to do, say, 70% or 75% of ARV or the value of the house instead of 80. And we said, bro, it does 2 or 3x what it would as a rental, as a long-term rental. So, but there's obviously inherent risk in not having a 12-month or 24-month lease or whatever it is. And so we've just worked very hard in building relationships with our banks. And so now I have 3 or 4 banks that we can send a refinance to that we already know roughly what the terms are and are cool with doing 75 or 80%. Usually we're able to get 80% on them. And I actually want to just make one note on this too. I have, over time, become far more less interested in high leverage. And my buddies who sleep the best at night have low leverage. My buddies that are the wealthiest guys I know, worth hundreds of millions of dollars, have very little debt. And they have a lot of dry powder and they have a lot of opportunity to make moves on deals. And so it's very difficult to be in acquisition and growth mode and in lower leverage mode or paying down debt. It's very difficult to do both of those at the same time unless you just have an insane amount of cash. But I encourage you to at least be thoughtful about this. And we have continued to watch our portfolio and say, hey, I want to continue to watch my loan to value, which is the what I owe on my loans versus what it's worth, and to continue to watch that go down over time. And continue to keep being conservative in our underwriting. So the question is, basically, how do you decide between a fix and flip and a rental?
Maybe you get to that point that you take your money and settle and just basically
Absolutely. So sitting on it as equity on your balance sheet is what that is, versus, turning and burning a house. So I kind of consider myself a reformed flipper. We've flipped a lot of houses, and the Nathan of 10 years ago would have answered this very differently than Nathan today. I don't normally talk about myself in third person. It's kind of weird. But I am a fundamental believer that oftentimes what happens is we take something that's really good and then we grass is green on the other side ourselves to believing that if we go do it on the other side that we're going to be just as good at it. And so I don't know too many high volume flippers that make a lot of money. I just don't. I know guys like Rich back there, or there's a handful of other guys in our mastermind who are incredible. They have their own crews. They are very good. They can buy something and do it, very well-priced labor. And I just never found that we could really flip at a high volume and make a lot of money. And so it comes back to the wealth machine and the cash machine question for me personally. And so if you want to be a flipper, then be a phenomenal flipper and make that a part of your cash machine, but it's not a wealth machine in my opinion anymore, because it costs so much overhead. I wrote a post about this the other day. If you don't follow me on social, it's been like every slide. So come give a follow on Instagram or Facebook, because I really spend a lot of time, and we'll make 7 figures this year from our social media, by the way. I will net 7 figures because we made a change and investment in social media 18 months ago. And we decided, actually, can I give you a little tip, a 7-figure tip? Is this cool? You still with me? Yeah. Can we get a little love up here? Make sure we're still awake. All right, so I want you to write this down. If you are not doing something on social media, you are crazy. Right. You're crazy. So I came up with this construct maybe 6-8 months ago, and it's called the pillars. And my realization was, after having things that I wrote, and I spent a lot of time writing. I was actually a professional musician. I made my living for 10 years plus as a musician. I'm used to writing. I love writing. I've done it all my life. And I would have posts that I felt like should have done well, and they wouldn't. And I thought my writing was good, and it wasn't good enough. And I had this realization that in order to be relevant today, you cannot just post about one thing. So my example that I always use is Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. Does anybody know who Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is? Yeah. Most people, right? Know who he is? So tell me about Dwayne. What are things that we know about him? He's from Hawaii. He's a Polynesian dude. What else? He's a movie star. He was a professional wrestler in football. He's jacked. He loves to eat crazy food on his cheat meal. He loves to help kids. He loves it on his mom and his family. He owns this little $350 million tequila company called Teremana Tequila. Say again?
He's a big investor.
And big investor. So think about this. It's a Saturday night. He has one of those giant Cinnabon things, which I tried to order, but you can't order if you don't live in the state. Dang it. So his pillar, right? He loves to eat like cheat meal. And he pulls the bottle of Teremana Tequila out of his fridge. And he says, "Cheers to all my whatever, insert Polynesian thing." He just hit 3 of his pillars. Think about it. He didn't say, "Go buy my tequila." No. And then the next post is like him doing some crazy scene with the Samoan guy who is his stunt double. He had 2 movies in the box office for the first time in like the history of movies. I can't remember the terminology, that hit whatever status. 2 movies in one weekend. He has his pillars very clear. And when I started to make mine clear, I started to see a tremendous change in my social, in my engagement, in my views, in my DMs. We have a full-time staff of 3 who just help on our social media side. 3 people. Well, it doesn't hurt when we have people to help us. But I still write all my stuff, and I batch my videos. But guess what? You can write a written post. You can write a written post with a picture. You can write a written post with a video. You can make that video a reel. You can make that video a short. So I want you to start thinking about, in your business, what are your pillars? What are the things you stand for? Who are you? It's not just about business. It has to be for people to connect with you. I know Joe Rogan really well. He just doesn't know me, right? Because we know his pillars. He's a freak athlete. He's a black belt in jiu-jitsu. He's a comedian. He has one of the biggest podcasts on the planet, right? So anyway, write your pillars down and execute on your social. Any other questions you have for me? What are my pillars? So mine is to do crazy stuff in the outdoors. So I've gone power paragliding. I have gone skydiving. I go hunt in the middle of nowhere. I love being outdoors. I love being a dad. And so you'll see posts about my kids and doing stuff with my kids all the time. My daughter and I love doing daddy-daughter dates. My son is going to be a YouTube multimillionaire. And so I spend time helping build his business, and we have a blast. I love real estate, and I love investing, and I talk about investing, and I talk about deals. I love helping, and I love talking about people that we have connected with and relationships we've built. And I love leadership. And you'll hear me talk about all the time about building teams and building relationships in business and what it looks like to actually scale a company that runs. You think going into open freaking heart surgery on Thursday would be anxiety causing enough if I didn't have a great team behind all those things that are running right now? Believe me, it's terrifying. Go backcountry. You know what? Here's a great test. Go somewhere like I did with Alaska, and where you don't have cell service. There's not a way to get on a Zoom call. It doesn't exist. Well, technically it does now because you can take Starlink, but I didn't bring it. So do those tests, and guess what? If you don't have it in your business yet, take 2 days. Shut your phone off. And then take a week. Shut your phone off. I went 3 weeks. Shut your phone off. So those are my pillars. I'm put on the planet to help people and live out their mission and do something that they love to do. There's too many people who sit and have a miserable life and make excuses about it and are whiners. I hate whiners. Go do something. Go make an impact. And guess what? If you're in a hole right now, go help somebody. That's it. You say, I don't have anything I can help with. BS. You can shovel some snow for your neighbor. Everybody has something they can do. And then guess what? Last piece of advice. So every day I start with a notepad, and I've done this for 5 years now, and I write 3 things: gratitude, and 3 things I'm focused on that day. And at the beginning of this talk, we talked about measurable, measurable, attainable, and I forget the third one. I'm senile. And guess what? I write 3 things down that is my focus for the day. And sometimes it's a very, very, very detailed thing, that the things you keep shoving down underneath the rug and you keep not doing it, I write it down. It's getting done today. Sometimes it's like, write 2025 goals for the lending company. And you know what? That takes all day or a week. But that's the focus for my week. Every single day. Imagine where you would be at the end of 2025 if every single day you got up and said, thank you, God, for another day. And there's always something you can be grateful for. And then you said, here's 3 things that will help me accomplish. How do I know what to write down? Well, guess what? When we set goals, we set them as far out as we can see, 5 or 10 years, and then 1 year for this year, right? What actually needs to be accomplished this year, and then this quarter, and then this month, and then this week, and then today. If it doesn't fit in that line, don't do it. Any other questions? Anything else I can help with?
I would love to hear more about your failures. That kind of was really fascinating to me.
How much time you got?
When you were talking about that, like what you learned.
I got a lot of them. Okay, I'll give you 2. So, actually, I'll give you 3. I'll make them short. One is a leadership one. I remember distinctly I was coming out of a mastermind event in late 2019-ish range, and I had just been introduced to the book Traction and the book Rocket Fuel. They're both by Gino Wickman. And it was talking about culture. And I was getting on this plane, and I'm reading this book, and I'm getting fired up. By the way, I read 54 books in 2024. So my goal is to do a book a week. I beat it by 2. And books changed my life. And so I'm reading this book, and I'm getting fired up. And I have this realization for the first time that I hated my office, and I actually didn't want to go into it. And I didn't like the culture in there. I didn't like dealing with the people, and I started avoiding my office, but I hadn't consciously realized it. And so after reading the book and also having a little Jocko Willink in my ear saying, "You don't like your office? Good." I was like, "Thank you, Jocko. That's great." So I walked in there and I said, "Hey guys, this office culture sucks. It's my fault." And I sat them down and we had a discussion about it and how we had to reorient to core values, because if it's not in my core values, then I hate it. And if I hate it, nothing's gonna work, because everything is on the responsibility of the leader. If it's not working, it's your fault, period. And so if you don't take accountability for what it is, like culture in your office, and I said this earlier, if you recognize that there's a problem and you don't identify it, if you have identified it and not done something about it, that is on you. So from that day forward, and I haven't been perfect about this, but I have made a conscious decision about how to define the culture in my business by having written core values. And then we hire and fire and give raise and praise and all the things based on core values. And we have an amazing office now. We have an amazing team. We have an amazing culture. We have a ton of fun. We hold each other accountable. I'm obscenely obnoxious about tracking, because guess what? What you actually put focus on, right? That is what gets measured. Okay, number 2, I lost over $1 million because we got over our skis and we were not tracking how fast getting into something new was and scaling it and testing it. In a particular neighborhood, we sold 5 or 6 homes and we lost $60,000 per house, new construction. So every time we closed, we wrote a $60,000 check. Yeah, that one still hurts a little bit, but that wasn't the only one. So I said, we lost well north of $1 million, and it was the recognition on a twofold problem. So number one, as a leader, I had grown into a position where I really didn't have to do anything, but I didn't have great metrics that came back to me on a regular basis. So I'll give you an example. Right now, on Mondays, my private banker sends me an email with every bank account that I have and a balance. So I don't have to go open the bank account, it just comes to me. Every day at 9 a.m., I get the metrics from our lending company for every member in the team, because every member has a number. And so I know on Monday, on Tuesday, on Wednesday, where we are as a company. So I took the things that were lessons and pain points where we made bad decisions, whether it was in leadership and I didn't have a good handle of what was happening, that's on me. We went into deals and we thought we would make more money. Prices of lumber went up, and the values of that neighborhood, it was 2020, or 2021. It was like a perfect storm of costs. And in that neighborhood, it just didn't sell the way we thought it would. And so the second half of that lesson is go smaller. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. I cannot reiterate enough. That is a sexy deal, 250 lots and make $11 million. But I have done tens and tens and tens and tens of millions of dollars with those guys, because we tested small. Can I do it again? Can I replicate it? Can I put a system behind it? I remember so many years I said, I'm a visionary. I'm not good in details. That is a cop-out. Just what details? There's only a few that are really important. And then number 3 would be investing in my own understanding and leadership and my capacity as a leader in bringing up more people faster. And this is something I think is a superpower for me now. And I don't say stuff like that very often because it feels weird to say, but I spend a lot of time on our people. And I think that you can't ever out-invest in your people around you, and so many people are afraid that they are going to over-invest and create their competition, and I've done it many times. But I have now just thought about other mechanisms where we can build investment plans, and I've given equity in companies to team members and created ways that we can far outpace what that one person could do in our own ecosystem, and keeping them and inspiring them and giving them more space, more accountability, more leadership. People don't want to be told usually, not the people I want to be around. They want to have space to operate and go kick some ass, right? So that's a huge lesson for me. But you have to define what that space is. You can't give it. Everybody wants to give leadership, but you can't do that. It's not possible. So there's 2 things that are required. You have to get it, want it, and have capacity to do it as the person who's receiving that. and they have to want to take it. And then you have to create the actual space for them to operate. And every single time I hire a new person now, I say, guess what? Dan, you are going to screw stuff up. And you know what? Me, I'm going to screw stuff up. And so instead of acting like that's not going to happen or it's not okay, it is okay. I expect you to do it. And I expect as soon as you screw something up to come tell me about it. And let's learn the lesson and fix it. And that has made all the difference.